Oh, hello, I have Dan and Ben for him. Yep. Hi, 1 minute.
Let's now talk about Edmund Spenser's Amoretti. Amoretti, or Little Loves, is another sonnet sequence. This one made up of 89 sonnets about a love affair that ends in her conquest or marriage. However, it does have a peculiar ending in that it sounds or feels like something bad happened. Anyway, after the 89 sonnets, it's followed by a song now called the Anacreontics. And it's about the baby Cupid being stung by a bee and then being chided by his mother Venus for complaining. She reminds him of how many lovers he has stung with his darts and how he showed no pity. It also opens with a prose dedication by its publisher, as well as a sonnet dedicated to Colin Clout. Now, Colin Clout is one of the characters in both The Shepherd's Calendar and The Fairy Queen. He is a shepherd. These two works are absolute masterpieces, and they should be read. They must be read. Now, the Spenserian Sonnet is the model for the Shakespearean sonnet. That is, there are no longer the Petrarchan octave or sestets in play. Everything is now quatrains ending in a rhymed couplet. And also, unlike in Sydney, there is only iambic pentameter, in other words, the 10-syllable decasyllabic line. Let's look at one sonnet, number 1.
Happy leaves when as those lily hands, which hold my life in their dead doing might, shall handle you and hold in love's soft bands, like captives trembling at the victor's sight, and happy lines on which with starry light those lamping eyes will deign sometimes to look and read the sorrows of my dying sprite, written with tears in heart's close bleeding book, and happy rhymes bathed in the sacred brook of Helicon, whence she derived is, when ye behold that angel's blessed look. My soul's long lacked food, my heaven's bliss, leaves, lines, and rhymes, seek her to please alone, whom if you please, I care for other none.
So, did you notice the rhyme scheme? Hands, might, bands, sight. We're thinking it's going to be that English variation of the Petrarchan octave, as we've seen in Surrey, Wyatt, and Sydney. Light, we think it's ABB. What is ABBA? What? And then we get look, C, sprite, B, book, C, and then brook, C, is, D, look, C, bliss, D, and then alone and none, which rhyme in 16th century English. This is the Spenserian sonnet's form. It is a 5-rhyme sonnet, which means it's made up of 5 rhymes. Shakespeare's will be 7. It's a standardized form, just like Shakespeare's is as well. So in other words, we're not seeing experiments you find in Surrey or, to lesser degrees, Wyatt and Sydney. Notice also, like in Sydney and will be in Shakespeare, it is made up of 4 distinct quatrains and 1 rhymed couplet. But did you notice also how they're bound by rhymed couplets? So if you look at the work, you look at the sonnet, it's actually made up of 3 rhymed couplets. And the final one is the sententious one that we associate with the volta. And what is its meter? If you count the syllables, you have 10. Happy ye leaves, caesura, when as those lily hands. Let's scan it. It begins with a trochaic inversion. Happy ye leaves, when as, there's our promotion, those lily hands. The second line is stranger. Begins with iambic pentameter before the caesura, which hold my life, caesura. And then you have this in their dead doing might. I don't know if he's influenced by his reading of Chaucer. Again, Spenser is influenced like Shakespeare by Chaucer. In their dead is all weeks. I mean, life, could it be in their dead doing might? In that sense, in is promoted, there is weak. Dead is weaker than doing, so it's demoted, and then you have the ing might. It's a complicated line. Spenser's lines really push the boundary of the demotion promotion system of iambic pentameter. I mean, the third line's the same way. Shall is weak, shall handle you, caesura again after the fourth. And hold, that's fine. In loves, that's fine. And then soft bands. That's soft bands. One adjective and one noun, 2 strongly stressed words. It proves that within the feet, stress is always relative. This is the foot, and if the iambic foot is always going to be weak strong, then in this case, soft is demoted and bands maintains its normal strength. So soft is just a little weaker. So in loves soft bands. You can hear the difference. So what's the poem about, this sonnet? Happy leaves when, as those lily hands which hold my life in their dead doing, right? He's suffering because of her, but she's lucky to be holding this manuscript with these pages, these leaves. Doing might, shall handle you and hold in love's soft bands like captives trembling at the victor's sight. So the book itself is perhaps going to make his case to her, but he views this book in the prison amoureuse topos. And there's a lot of prisoner of love poetry and lots of prisoners in Amoretti. The pages are like captives trembling before her. He's addressing a book, Happy Leaves. How the book's pages are lucky to be handled by so beautiful a lady. Do you remember that old English riddle we read a while back about the killing of a living animal and turning it into a book? Well, here, she's the killer. She's killing him, and she's holding these leaves, these pages. And happy lines on which with starry light those lamping eyes will deign sometimes to look and read the sorrows of my dying sprite, written with tears in heart's close beating book. The happy lines, that's the poetry she runs her eyes across. She may not look on him acknowledge him. But a poem she has to look at. And maybe she'll learn of his dying in those lines. Writing a poem with tears as ink, that's an old classical image, an image from antiquity. It's a topos found in Ovid. And the bleeding book is his dying. Blood writing is another topos. It's a religious topos. Christ in his dying wrote the gospel with red, purple, royal ink. And happy rhymes, bathed in the sacred brook of Helicon, whence she derived is. When you behold the angel's blessed look, my soul's long lacked food, my heaven's bliss. There's no volta here in the Petrarchan sense. The argument continues. Here, poetry is like Sidney's. It becomes Greek. It's inspirational. It's associated with the muse and Helicon, the mountainous home of the muses, the source of this new Renaissance poetry, a new topos that we believe in. Poetry is divine. Then, like an old medieval poetry, remember Spenser loved medieval poetry. He liked making old things new. That was Spenser's art. He turns the volta into an envoy. Leaves, lines, and rhymes. Seek her to please alone, whom if you please, I care for other none. You remember how in medieval poetry, especially in the ballade, the poem is sent out to the prince? Here he's sending his poem out to her. He got this idea from Chaucer's Troilus and Cresside, when Chaucer addresses his romance and says, "Go, little book." And what he's hoping for is that those pages that she's been looking at, those lines she's been looking at, those inspired rhymes she's be looking at, they will please her. Remember what we talked about in Sydney about pleasing, in related to teaching and convincing? He hopes, if anything, if he can just please her with his own suffering, that's good enough for him. Finally, before we end this, did you catch some of the figures? Did you hear any when you were listening to this poem? There is antithesis, life and dead. That's an example of antithesis. There's also lots of alliteration, especially on the letter L. Leaves, lily, life, loves, like, lines, etc. And then there's also a song-like refrain quality. The happies repeated over and over again. Happy ye, happy lines, and happy rhymes. And finally, my favorite figure of all, anadiplosis. It's a very loose example of anadiplosis. Please alone, if you please. All right, let's listen to the poem again.
Happy leaves when as those lily hands, which hold my life in their dead doing might, shall handle you in holden loved soft bands, like captives trembling at the victor's sight, and happy lines on which with starry light those lamping eyes will deign sometimes to look and read the sorrows of my dying sprite, written with tears in heart's close bleeding book, and happy rhymes bathed in the sacred brook of Helicon, whence she derived is, when ye behold that angel's blessed look. My soul's long lacked food, my heaven's bliss, leaves, lines, and rhymes, seek her to please alone, whom if you please, I care for other none.
Alright guys, don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that notification bell.